Hello, welcome everyone. For the new session of webinar presented by Vogue, I am Shruti Gupta, working for Vogue Institute as assistant professor. Now over to Ankita, and she is my colleague and she will give you introduction. Over to Ankita.
Thank you, Shruti. Good afternoon, everyone. This is architect Ankita Revankar, assistant professor at Vogue Institute of Art and Design. I will now quickly brief about the institute. Vogue stands with the glory of 24 years of successful journey in the domain of fashion and design education. The institute started in the year 1996 by a visionary, Dr. M.M. Karyappa, chairman, who has composed the best feasible attributes to build the institute into an incredible place for learning, thus creating a planet of creativity where the young minds churn out their creative abilities into reality. As we all know, the institution is hosting a series of webinars for its students. I take great pleasure in introducing Ms. Arzu Mistry for the day and address our students and participants. So before we start with the session, I would like to give a brief introduction about Arzu. She's an educator and an artist. She teaches at Srishti Institute for Art and Design, Bangalore. She facilitates the art in transit and public art projects in the city of Bangalore and internationally, with the hope that art can facilitate dialogue between people and the urban spaces they inhabit. Arzu co-facilitates the Accordion Book Project and is the co-creator of the book Unfolding Practice, Reflections on Learning and Teaching. Welcome to the webinar, Arzu. Over to you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Nice to see everybody. And I'm glad that we're actually a small group because I'm hoping that there's going to be a lot of interaction between us. So as Ankita already introduced me, I won't say too much more, except that as an artist and an educator, I am really interested in how artistic thinking and artistic process happens in young minds like yours. I teach at the Srishti Institute of Art, Design and Technology, and I also teach at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. And so I'm always working with young people who are also interested in art and design practice, but also in education practice. So today we will be focusing on looking at creative process and creative practice. And I will be sharing a process that I have developed for myself so that I'm able to create a way to work with the way I think. And I hope that this session will inspire you to create a method of documenting your creative practice that works for the way you think. So we'll start with, as Ankita mentioned, I done a project called the Accordion Book Project. Do people know what an accordion is? I think we often think about an accordion as those musical instruments that go back and forth and have many pleats, as one might say. And here with the accordion book practice, what we do is actually work with the simple accordion, but a paper version of it, a paper book. And for many years, as an art student, as a student who was really interested in arts education, as a designer and as an educator, I would keep typical sketchbooks that were notebooks like this, that I'm sure all of you do. And I would write in them and I would generate all these thoughts, all these plans. And I had a million of these notebooks and I found it really difficult to find my ideas. I would be, okay, where is that? Is that on page 5? Is that on page 25? Where are these ideas? And the other thing that I found really difficult was to connect ideas. If I had an idea that I had put down 3 months ago and that was on page 5, and if I had another idea that I had put down yesterday that was on page 25, how do I connect these ideas? How do I figure out an analog way to connect these? Now, I'm going to start by sharing my screen a little bit and giving you a brief introduction to my practice. And through the session, I have a couple of questions for you. So we won't keep the question and answer only till the end. I'm going to break it up with asking you some questions, and I hope that you folks will be able to respond during the seminar. And I will take 3 or 4 the responses and use that to facilitate the discussion that we're going to have. Okay. All right. So okay, so is everybody able to see my screen fine? I hope you are, and I hope that somebody will tell me if you're not able to see it.
Yes, Arzu, we can see.
Great, thank you. And you're able to hear me fine as well, right?
Yeah, sure.
Great, thank you. So all of you are creative practitioners, and you're all designers or artists. And I'm sure that you have ways that you record your creative thoughts, and you're able to track your thinking from the time you have no idea at all to the time that you have an idea, and eventually to implementation. And I am curious about getting into that. How do you do that? What are the ways that you do that? And I hope that our discussion today will focus on that. I personally have created a process where I like to construct my thinking as it happens. So I build these handmade books that are quite messy. They're not super neat. They're not super beautiful. They are my sketchbooks, and they are in the form of an accordion. And I use that as a way to map my thinking and my creative practice. And that is the process I'm going to share with you today. I am an artist, and I also make books that are not reflection books, but that are artistic books. And here you see an example of that, and these are some other artist books that I've created. And I also am very much an educator, and I run a lot of workshops with art and design colleges around artistic process. Today's practice is going to focus on this very simple zigzag fold of an accordion and the amazing possibilities that this offers as a way to track my creative thinking. And I hope to use it as a way to discuss with you about your creative thinking. So this is a question that I have for all of you, and I'm going to share the question, and hopefully you will generate some ideas as I go on in the slideshow. And then after I show you a short video, we will actually pause and look at what your answers to this question are. Okay, so the question here, sorry, let me just play that again. The question here, it says, you are all designers and creative people. What are the methods that you use to keep track of your thinking and your creative process? So go ahead and think about what are the ways that you use. And if you are able to put this in the question and answer space, that would be great for us to generate a conversation around that. Okay. This is the way I use this. This is a simple system where I actually like to use brown paper, because brown paper is not as precious as white paper. Sometimes I feel that white paper, particularly as artists and designers, that it contributes to artist block. Because you're too worried about what you're going to put down. But if you're working with paper that's recycled paper or brown paper, you don't worry too much. It's a place to gather, generate ideas. But also why I like the accordion fold is that I'm able to map it and open up my ideas in a way that I find very difficult in a traditional notebook like this. And I've been using this practice and supporting other students and faculty in other art and design institutions to use this for themselves. So this is an example of a faculty book where she's working with conductive tape and using these books as a way to light up certain ideas. This is another educator who is using this to show her process of how she's made a stencil. This is another student's book on her creative process. This is another student's book on his creative process. And I come back to asking the question, why do we bother making anything by hand today, a handmade book, when you have you have technology, you have your phones, etc. And so this is a question that I'm curious about how many of you actually use your sketchbooks and make handmade books, and how many of you use your primarily use your computer or your phones as a way to track your thinking. So I'm just going to I stopped sharing my screen here, but I'm going to read this this little excerpt out, and it's from a book called The Hand by The Heart of Craft by Bruce Metcalf. So he asks, he asks, why bother to make anything by hand today? Why bother when cutting edge technology is moving towards the complete automation of manufacturing? Why bother when you can buy so many inexpensive and efficient things that function so well? Why bother with all this messy, laborious, and highly demanding work? Isn't it stupidly nostalgic and obsolete, or nearly so? Shouldn't we just let handwork die a quick death and get on with our 21st century lives without looking back? To answer this question, I'll start with the hand itself. Most of us have two of them, and generally we take them for granted, but they are quite marvelous instruments. The hand doesn't really end at the wrist because it is connected to a network of tendons and muscles and bones that extend all the way to the spine. The hand also contains a dense array of nerve endings which are routed through the spinal cord and then to many areas of the brain. So it is now theorized that hand use, language use, and cognition all evolved interdependently. You can regard the hand as an instrument of language and an extension of the brain. Each one probably influenced the other, and each became part of our unique biological nature. Now, as creative people, as designers, and many of you are fashion designers, you are working with the hand, but you're also working with technology. So I am curious what you experience in terms of handwork, and how does handwork help cognition? In my view, when I am constructing my thinking with my hands, it helps me make a mental map in a much stronger way, partly because the way learning happens is through links and connections and associations. And the fact that your hands are actually actively involved in engaging with something really creates a stronger mental model in essence. So I will show you a short video, and what I'm also going to do is I am going to share a link. So yesterday when we were testing this out, we found that the video played on Zoom, but it was also sometimes stopping. So for those of you, I'm going to make a request. If the video plays fine on Zoom, that's great. If you're having trouble viewing the video that I'm going to show you right now on Zoom, just click the link that is in the chat. I've put the link in the chat. It's a Google Drive file. And you can just mute the Zoom video for the duration of the video. It's just 4 minutes long. And then after we watch the video, we're going to pause and hopefully have a discussion around this. Okay? So I'm going to share my screen again. And there we go. Unfolding practice is an analog process for tracking and creating network maps of your thinking and your creative practice. We use accordion books to capture, visualize, build, and reflect on our practice. When you physically construct your thinking, building between text and image, physically connecting and extending ideas, you begin to build a mental networked map of your thinking. Networked thinking that does more to build connections between ideas and less to segment and categorize them.
Knowledge is constructed in associated ways with other knowledge. And this super simple and versatile base structure of the accordion fold is a beautiful opportunity for the meeting of form and function. Hi, I'm Arzu Mistry and I enjoy making books. And today I'm going to share a little bit about an accordion book practice that I use. So I make accordion books for artistic practice, and I also make accordion books for reflection, for research, for documentation. And for many years, I've used to keep sketchbooks and journals that are typical books. And I found it really hard to keep track of my thinking. I found it hard to find things in the many sketchbooks that I had. And I also found it hard to connect things that were on page 5 and on page 25, but were about the same idea. So I wanted to devise a way where I could physically map my thinking process. And I turned to the simple accordion for that. I love the accordion for many reasons. One is that it's really very basic, but very versatile. I can work across sheets of paper, as you can see there. So I can work across the frame, and wherever I want to, I can start to add flaps and extensions to build my ideas in different directions. So the accordion book works like a map of my thinking, and the ability for this simple accordion is that it also has the potential to be three-dimensional. With this very, very, very simple structure, I realized that I am able to build my thinking as it happens, layer by layer, and I have found it extremely useful for my reflective practice. Working with teachers and students over the last 10 years, we've used the simple accordion and support it with various processes and strategies for documentation, collection, planning, creating, and reflecting. The practice itself focuses on empowering the learner to make these books their own, developing their own strategies to connect their hands and their minds, their inner and outer worlds, and in that way develop agency over their own learning. So in this series of videos, I want to share how to make accordion books and why I do make accordion books for reflective practice.
Okay, so let's pause for a second and see, what are the thoughts that you all have. So the question that I had asked you is, you are all creative practitioners. What are the methods that you use to keep track of your thinking? So let's see what folks have responded. So Vinita has said that it's about connecting ideas, scribbling out concepts, and that's how she keeps track. And that's a very, very important point, the idea of connecting. I think that a lot of times we segment knowledge in different areas. Physics is in one space, biology is in one space, fashion is in another space. But today, given all of the crisis that we have around ecology, if fashion and biology don't connect together, we're doing something wrong, right? So, I really appreciate your point about connecting. Manan has said that, let's see here, I don't want to go up. To keep track of my thinking and creative process, I've dedicated one of my whole walls in my bedroom to my ideas. I draw and write my ideas on paper and stick it on the wall and stand there looking at my ideas. This helps me a lot. So great. So Manan, you're creating an accordion book in a sense on your wall. One of the reasons that I like to do this in a book is because I'm able to take it around with me, but I really appreciate seeing it flat and opened out and spread out so that I'm able to see all of these links and these relationships. It's great for creating portfolios. Sketching is a very important part of tracking your practice. Looking at nearby things and observing things. So this is great. Thank you, Dibya, for saying this, because I'm going to use this as we go along in our conversation today. All right, so let's keep going. So the next phase of what I'm going to do is share some ideas with you about how I think about working in these books. And I think that they will connect very clearly to how you think about process, and they connect very much to the idea of observation that Dibya has brought up. So I'm going to share my screen again, and oh, hold on. Okay, so let's see here. No, not desktop. I'm going to try that again. I'm going to share my screen. Sorry about that. There we go. Okay, so I'm just going to remove this, and so that I'm able to see these a little bit clearer. Great. Okay, so so we're going to proceed to 5 ideas that I like to keep in mind when I'm tracking my creative process, and I'm sharing these 5 ideas with you. So the first idea is things talk to me, being alert to what grabs and holds my attention. So I have a question for all of you. What are the things that are going on in the world today that are talking to you, that are grabbing and holding your attention? This could be in the news or social media, or it could be on your own terrace, right? So it could be about the migrant crisis that's going on. It could be about all of the people who are sitting at home baking bread. It could be about the many different courses people are using this time to learn. How many of you are gardening? It could be around food security and the fact that people really struggled for food during this crisis. But what is going on in the world today that is talking to you or grabbing and holding your attention? So let's see what folks have to say about that. Any thoughts on what is going on in the world today that is grabbing and holding your attention? Okay, I'm going to give you guys a moment to think about that. And I'm going to share, so issues of unemployment. Many of you are probably worried as you graduate, what's going to happen out there in the world. Now, do issues of unemployment affect your practice, affect the work that you do? How do we connect what's going on in the world today, and how do we connect it to our creative practice, right? So, so I'm going to take this idea a little bit of things talking to me. I'm sorry, these things are, I don't know if you can see. Yeah, there we go. So there's this great book that I love, and it's called On Looking: 11 Walks with Expert Eyes. And the author says that she was walking around her block. She had lived in this place all her life. And she said that she was paying so little attention to most of what was right before us that I became a sleepwalker on the sidewalk. What I saw and attended to was exactly what I expected to see. What my dog showed me was that my attention, along with attention's companion, inattention to everything else. So here this person is talking about the fact that we engage with our world with a certain amount of numbness. We walk around and, we know that things are talking to us, but how much do we listen to them? And the first thing that I use with my students when we are engaging in starting to build our ideas about what we're going to do and how do we start using our accordion books as a way to start collecting the things that talk to you. And there are two big ideas. One is the idea of grabbiness. There are many things around us. They could be visual or conceptual. They could be things we like or things we absolutely get repulsed by. We call these types of things grabby. They are holding our attention in some way. Something is grabby if it catches and most crucially holds your attention. How can you become alert and look for themes and patterns in the things that you notice? This is the beginning of the journey. And we really encourage our students to start collecting the things that grab and hold your attention. Now, one of the things that I have an issue with many, education systems, but I think particularly also in the Indian education system, is that we always, as students, expect that the teacher or the internet or an author knows better in some ways than us. And we stop trusting our own observation or our own listening. And we expect to take on ideas that belong to someone else. And one of the big aspects about keeping these kinds of reflection journals is to start trusting your own observations. Can you start collecting the tiny, tiny things that start talking to you? And whether you're a third grader or you're a college student, how do you start to feel like you own your thoughts, or you have that the thoughts that you are having has value? And of course, you do want to be able to connect those thoughts to other people's thoughts, but the ability to trust one's observations, as Divya said in the chat, is really important. And I'm sure that you guys as art and design students are also really taught to observe a lot. Now, yes, we're taught to observe, but are we also taught to make that observation visible in some way? Are we taught to capture and collect as much as we can when we are engaging? And this is really the first step of starting a reflective practice, is just to start capturing and building collections of the things that are talking to you. You don't have to make judgment about it. You don't have to make assumptions about it. You don't have to start connecting them as yet. You just need to start collecting them. And that's a crucial piece of this kind of practice. After you build this collection of whatever is talking to you and you are being alert to, you can start to engage in mapping of some kind. I'm sure all of you know how to make mind maps. And mind maps are just metaphors of an act of mapping, an act of sorting and categorizing and relating and connecting. So this is another author that I love, and he is a writer, and he has a book called Maps of the Imagination. So he says, we organize information on maps in order to see our knowledge in new ways. Now, many of you might keep a sketchbook and we only collect, but we don't sort. So collecting was step one, right? Like you look at the things that are talking to you and you collect them. But it is equally important to revisit whatever you have collected and sort it out in some kind of a map. So he says, we organize information on maps in order to see our knowledge in new ways. As a result, maps suggest explanations, and while explanations reassure us, they also inspire us to ask questions, consider other possibilities. To ask for a map is to say, tell me a story. So a map becomes a beginning of a creative inquiry, a creative quest of some kind, because based on how you decide to sort and map your thinking, that will give rise and space for new questions. So, very much this second phase of the work that I do and I support people in keeping these kind of books is, how do you map the terrain? And in that, Mapping is very much an exercise of exploring. That's why maps were created, right, as part of exploration. Today, we use our Google Maps to guide us. So there's very much the act of guiding. But there's also the process of getting lost. And as a creative person, that aspect of getting lost is super important. So mapping is a many-layered metaphor for sorting and reflecting. To map is to document, to give shape, to explore, to guide, to get lost, and crucially to interpret and make meaning. The kinds of terrain that we might be mapping are geographic, temporal, imagined, cultural, philosophical, emotional, cognitive, conceptual, qualitative, and quantitative. We can make maps on any of these things. So there's the aspect of exploring. And again, I come to Peter Turchi with the Maps of the Imagination, where he says, artistic creation is a voyage into the unknown. In our own eyes, we are off the map. The excitement of potential discovery is accompanied by anxiety, despair, caution, perhaps boldness, and always the risk of failure. Failure can take the form of becoming hopelessly lost or pointlessly lost, or not finding what we came for, though the last is sometimes happily accompanied by the discovery of something we didn't anticipate or we couldn't have even imagined before we found it. We strike out for what we believe to be uncharted waters. This is a lot of what exploring is about, only to find ourselves sailing in someone else's bathtub. Those are the days where it seems that nothing new is there to discover but the limitations of our own experience and understanding. And I really like this quote because he's talking about an external exploration and an internal exploration of self. And one of the big aspects of keeping a reflective practice and a reflective journal is that you can go back and forth between your inner and your outer worlds. And then very much the act of mapping is also the act of guiding. As designers or as friends or as caregivers, we're always guiding others. So maps function as guides when we are lost. But as designers and artists, it is also really important for us to get lost. The thing, the nature of which is totally unknown to you, is usually what you need to find. And finding it is a matter of getting lost. Getting lost was not a matter of geography so much as identity, a passionate desire, even an urgent need to become no one and anyone. So this is a quote from Rebecca Solnit for a fantastic book, if any of you are interested, called The Field Guide to Getting Lost. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second, and I'm going to see whether there are other thoughts that people have. Okay. I don't know what I would do without my imagination to explore with my mind the endless possibility. We couldn't survive for long or advance as a species without it. Being imaginative would be grabbing and holding attention or creating something new. So that's a really interesting idea, that that your imagination itself is something that grabs and holds your attention. And many of you have talked about some of the struggles that are going on right now: unemployment, the pre-COVID situation, post-COVID situation, running for money. But what are the other things that talk to you or that grab your attention? Are there other things that grab your attention? Racism right now, of course, it's very much in our face. What are the other things? So this is from a while ago, and I'm just reading from this page here that you saw, and it's in this artist book, which is very much about, it's called Unfolding Practice, Reflections on Learning and Teaching. And I look at the things that talk to me, and I'm going to just read this because I think it might be interesting for you. Trees talk to me. They will interrupt my conversation in mid-sentence and force me to marvel at their shapes, smells, seed pods, sometimes loud fruits and sometimes silent flowers. Over the years of being grabbed by trees and plants, I've learned to read their clues and their tricks for enticing me, as well as all the insect, bird, and animal collaborators that lure and put to use. Plants have developed great skills and tools for grabbiness in order to survive, from their flashy flower advertisements to the spiky seeds that latch on and want you to take them for a walk. I have become a willing participant in their fan club, propelled by their ability to hold my attention. So this is something that is not necessarily current today. Of course, yes, a lot of people are talking about the environment and ecology, but trees and plants are something that grabs and holds my attention. What are some other things? We're talking about the things that are really huge. So you're talking about racism, you're talking about politics right now, you're talking about a crisis. What are some other things that are, say, maybe not so clear as, but maybe confusing you? Even things that confuse you grab and hold your attention. What might be some of those things? Okay, so border issues, insecurity, crisis of loneliness, lack of self-love. So somebody's talking about internal things that grab and hold your attention. So your books and your reflective practice are spaces for you to engage and map and engage in an inquiry about any of these ideas. And I hope that you don't think about the external things that grab and hold your attention, but also the internal things that grab and hold your attention. And how do you go from kind of collecting those ideas and building broadly about them, and then using that to map those ideas out and engage and open them up in certain ways? So newspaper articles on migrant workers and the COVID crisis in general, right? So that's a collection. So there's a collection. How many of you have collections? Whether it's a collection of saris or earrings or coins or leaves or seeds or newspaper articles. How many of you have collections? Collections are a great way to also hone in to thinking about what something that grabs and holds your attention is. So coin collections. Okay. Photography, photographs, these are great collections. But the thing is that, like I said, the collection cannot just stay as a collection. It has to go from being a collection to starting to map with it and then continuing to go along. So I'm going to share some of the next steps that I use in moving along in this kind of creative inquiry and reflection. So the first one was about looking at the things that talk to you and hold your attention, starting to build a collection. Now, from that collection, I'm encouraging people to start to build maps of their thinking. From maps, I encourage you to start exchanging your ideas with other people. So here, this is an image that I've created, which is fish becoming leaves, and the kind of this change also between in this particular book, it goes between river water that goes into brackish water and then goes into the sea. And that space, that point where the sea and a river meet, that brackish zone, what we sometimes call the mangroves, etc., is really rich. Why is it rich? It's rich because sweet water and salt water are mixing together. And that is when two unlike things start to mix with each other, there is a huge potential for interaction and growth and richness. So my next suggestion in this process of keeping a creative, reflective process going is to exchange, is to engage in exchange and to be alert to what happens in an exchange. So these are a couple of quotes. One is by this woman, amazing woman, Margaret Wheatley, who has written a beautiful book called Turn to One Another, Simple Conversations to Restore Hope to the Future. So she says, talk to people you know, talk to people you don't know, talk to people you never talk to. Be intrigued by the differences you hear, expect to be surprised, treasure curiosity more than certainty. Now, this is a really important step. If we stay only with our own mapping and our own collecting, we stay quite isolated. But when we start to share our collections and our maps with other people and engage in their different ways of looking at the same things, then we start to grow and we start to expand. So I always encourage exchange as the next phase of engaging in this creative process. The word exchange evokes diverse ideas, from love, gift, argument, garage sale to collaboration and globalization. We are hardly conscious of the many daily exchanges we make within the capital, social, and redistributive economic structures that we live in. Exchanges of power in classrooms, in workspaces, between individuals are happening all the time. We're really experiencing that with the dynamic of racism right now, which ultimately is an exchange. It's a type of toxic exchange. Relationships in nature are sometimes mutually beneficial, sometimes exploitative, sometimes parasitic, and often transformative in both positive and negative ways. Looking at the various dynamics and qualities of these different types of interpersonal exchanges can reveal a lot about degrees of democracy, who is empowered, who is disempowered, what new forms and ideas are rising out of exchanges. No ideas or work exist in a vacuum. They all come from a kind of exchange. How can we make exchanges visible and use it as a generative lens with which we look at our practice as designers, artists, and world citizens? So the third step is really encouraging you to exchange and noticing and making visible what happens when in an exchange that you might not necessarily be comfortable with, in an exchange that is more about curiosity and surprise, in an exchange that is about difference. These are a way to expand your notion of something, your collections, your maps, and build a different and a wider way for you to start to engage with different ideas in the world. So, many of you have talked about your ideas, right? From nature and ecology to your imagination, to racism, to the COVID crisis. How do the ideas that grab your attention make their way into your work as designers? So this is a question for you, and I hope that you'll take some time to put some ideas in the question and answer or the chat. How do the ideas that grab and hold your attention make their way into your work as designers? So somebody is already talking about taking photographs of the migrant crisis. Where is that going to go? Do you have a plan for that already? Many of you are aware of the India-China crisis or racism, or even the idea of loss and loneliness. Is that making its way into your work as a designer in some way? How is that making its way into your work? These are some of the things to think about in, say, stage 4 of this process. So the stage 4 of this process is, what would an artist do? And when I say artist, I mean all creative practitioners. So very much designers, but really looking at what is it that we as creative practitioners, what becomes our role? What do we do about all of these things that are catching and holding our attention? Do we ignore them, or do we act with them in some way? So the Paul Chan, who is an artist, says, the art I admire the most is the kind I understand the least and keep on not understanding. It shows me uncompromisingly that another world is possible, and that neither the world the 99% struggle with, nor the one enjoyed by the 1% are good enough to settle for. I like this quote because Paul Chan is also talking about the fact that we don't know how things are going to play out as yet. And it is in that space that we as creative people have to engage with. So what are the ways that we can engage with this? Contemporary artists and designers are excellent role models for any proactive people in the world today. They themselves are proactive, they are self-driven free agents, they are fired up in that there is a palpable sense that they are compelled to do what they do and have a extremely high level of engagement and sense of purpose in their work. As an educator, I would love nothing more to help ignite the kind of drive and purposiveness in myself and my students. Purposiveness is just the purposefulness in myself and in my students. Artists do a whole range of things. We don't give credit enough to artists or designers, but they synthesize, they envision, reframe, catalyze, trigger, juxtapose, persuade, inform, translate, narrate, hybridize, analyze, bridge, connect, invent, predict, play tricks, observe, critique, provoke, think systematically, inquire creatively, explore multiple perspectives. All these become ways, all these become lenses and methods for taking the ideas that are talking to you and then figuring out some way that they become a part of your creative practice. So this is step 4. What would you do with all of the things that are talking to you? Now that you've collected, you have mapped, you've exchanged these ideas with somebody else, now what do you do with them? And these are some ways to do that. So then I come to the final point that I want to make, where many of you, I'm sure, have got to this point where you get stuck, where you have artist or designer block. And what are the ways that you get unstuck in order to move forward from your creative work? So again, I'm gonna pause now, and I'm gonna see whether you have ideas on how you take your collections, or you take the things that grab and hold your attention, and how they manifest in your work. And also this idea of when you get stuck as an artist or a designer, what are the ways that you use to get unstuck in order to move forward with your creative work? So take some time to answer those ideas in the chat or in the question and answer space. Doing completely weird things to uplift myself. Multiple projects. Now, what do you mean by less timeline? That's a question I have for you. More options. I appreciate this. The things that grab your attention, the shades and the tints of colors of the sky are different every day. The way time changes. So a couple of people are talking about time, and I think that that's an important point. The way time changes, in my garden when I'm looking at plants and flowers, looking at the sky, feel like protecting it. As an interior designer, I have to think about sustainable design. By doodling, building an informative character, by understanding the principles of design. Okay, so some people engage in instrumental music to unblock. Leave the space and try and look at it from a different perspective. So maybe somebody is saying that, okay, yeah, how do you surprise yourself? Create a wow factor. These are all great ways to get unstuck. Your mind gets tired, right? So, and mood swings. These are all ways that often get you into the place where you are getting stuck. So what are some other ways that people get unstuck? I personally get unstuck by working in my books, by just playing around. And I'm going to actually get up and grab this book. It's an amazing book that if any of you have, so these two books are real gems. They are by this artist and cartoonist Linda Barry, and they're called What It Is. And this is she asked this question: do you wish you could write? But what I love about her work is that she's really playful. She asks these questions and she just explores them with collage. So she's not really answering the questions, she's just exploring them openly. So this is a question where she says, what is self-consciousness? What is movement? Every single page has a question. Do you wish you could sing? Do you wish you could draw? And the ways that she engages with these questions is not so much to answer them, but to explore them and to be playful. So many of you have talked about doodling, being playful in some way. Create stories from your drawings. Listen to useless things and then come up with fresh ideas. These are all great things. And the thing is that we don't really acknowledge this so much in school, but they're really valuable ways, because sometimes our mind needs a way to break or to look at something from a different angle. So that becomes a really important piece of the process. One of my favorite activities is to draw. And I will, hold my pencil, but I'll stick a sheet of paper on the top so I can't see what I'm drawing. And I might be drawing something and it looks completely different when I take the sheet off, but it's a great way to kind of break this intensity that my mind gets into, but form a better connection between my hand and my mind. So these are some of the, ways that, say, doodling helps in some way. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen again, and we'll kind of look at this last bit, and then I'm going to open it up for us to have our closing conversations. When I am stuck, I reach for excitement, but not too hard. It is when I find myself playing more than trying that I'm able to work my way out of a block. So, how do you, sometimes it's about you getting out of your own way. It's an artist block, but you're the problem. So you have to get yourself out of your own way to help move it on. Sometimes when I make work, there is a moment where what I want to make and what I make it with fuse in such a way that the piece begins against my intention to take on a form of its own. It is as though I am no longer the prime mover. At this point, what is in front of me becomes as strange to me as I am essentially to myself. This is the point I'm always trying to reach. So this artist, Paul Chan, says, the work starts to take on its own meaning. I'm not forcing it, right? It is easy to feel overwhelmed by the pervasive noise which can interfere with our ability to make meaning, and suddenly we cannot see the forest for the trees. We become immobilized by uncertainty, so uncomfortable with not knowing that we ultimately quit trying, or we feel stuck in certainty, which makes it seem like there is just one way to think or act and binds us from seeing alternative ways. Whatever the cause may be, our classrooms, workspaces, and indeed our internal thoughts and feelings can too often feel like predictable, constraining, non-permeable boxes that we want to escape. How do we get out of our own way? And this is a quote from Yo-Yo Ma, who's the musician. At the moment of presentation, the whole point of performance is to have the confidence to lose your inhibition, because you get rewarded for trying. You get rewarded for trying. You do not get rewarded for being inhibited. And when you go from having to do something to wanting to do something, only you know where the switch is. And the more you actually know where the switch is for yourself, the more you can be incredibly joyous and go from wedding to wedding night. So he's engaging with this thing of performance, and how does performance really take your practice to the next level, to the level of joy. And part of it is trusting the process and not worrying to try to close it too much. So, I'm going to open it up for discussion now, and just open questions that anybody can share for the last few minutes of our time together. But if you want to know more about the work that I do, you can visit this website. It's called the Accordion Book Project, and you can see the kind of work that that's happening there. So let's open it up for questions, for thoughts. Looking at art books, going for arts exhibitions, browsing artists' work online. So keeping a sketchbook, like I said, I agree with you. It's really important, but part of it is not just stopping at the collection. You have to work with that collection in some way. And the 5 points that I was trying to make to you are being alert to the things that grab and hold your attention. So that's very much building the collection, mapping taking that material and mapping it in some way, exchanging that material with other people so that you can expand your ideas, thinking about how that material makes its way into your practice and what do you do as a creative person with it, and then how do you get out of your own way so that you are engaged when you get stuck or you have artist block. No, I haven't read the book Big Magic, but I am going to note it down. And it sounds like there are some synonymous ideas here. What do I do when I get demotivated? I think that part of the process is, and I get demotivated quite a bit, is being patient with myself. And sometimes, like I said, I just have to play. So I open up my books. I already have some questions that I was writing down earlier today that I am going to engage with this afternoon or this evening after our talk, but I'm just going to start playing in these books, using it as a way to put down some ideas. And many of you have talked about the different things that you do. You read, you might be listening to something else. I love audiobooks or podcasts because they really set my mind in a different direction. When I'm taking notes, then I start to be able to map. One of the crucial things, I think, is revisiting your ideas. And I think that as creative people, we're always collecting, we're always gathering, but how often do we revisit ideas? And I think that's a really interesting and an important point, is how do you revisit your ideas? Yeah, I do workshops online, and you can just follow the Accordion Book Project. My name is Arzu Mistry. You can follow me on Instagram, and there are various workshops that I do that you can engage with. I am going to go back to one image and share this as a closing, as a closing thought with all of you guys, and and then we can continue to have our conversations. But I want to read you this poem by this philosopher and Asian poet Lao Tzu. Everybody on earth knowing that beauty is beautiful makes ugliness. Everybody knowing that goodness is good makes wickedness. For being and non-being arise together. Hard and easy complete each other. Long and short shape each other. High and low depend on each other. Note and voice make the music together. Before and after follow each other. That's why the wise soul does without doing, teaches without talking, and the things of this world exist. They are. You can't refuse them. To bear and not to own, to act and not to lay claim, to do the work and let it go, for letting go is what makes it stay. I really love this poem because it really captures the idea of getting out of your own way, of letting go, letting go in some way. I have made seed paper books, yes. And I like certain brain exercises and tricks, but I think that, and I think that keeping a collection of the kind of things that work for you is really important. As an artist, and I'm always looking, if any of you are interested in contributing to a project, where I'm really interested in how creative people get out of their own way. How do they get unstuck? Both of these things are not exactly the same thing, but they overlap. So if anybody has other ideas that they would like to share, this is something that I am really interested in. So this is a really interesting question. What is the best way to improve patience while disturbed, or while going out of track while designing? So I think that the voice in our heads as artists and designers is almost the most judgmental voice. It's telling you constantly, this is not good, that is not good, this is not good, that is not good. And sometimes you have to figure out a way to quieten the voice in your head. And in some ways, it's a very old book, but I'm sure many of you have seen it, or many of your faculty might have also used it. But it's a book called Drawing from the Right Side of the Brain. You may have, it's a very old book. But one of the simple exercises that I loved so much in that book is that the author asks you to take something and flip it upside down. Now, what you've done is that, you know, the way our mind works is that it completes images for us. You might see half of something, but already it's a tree, or already it's a car. We create these symbol systems that are super strong in our head. But by just flipping it, our eyes and our minds are not used to the flip image, and sometimes we're able to see it very differently. So to come back to this point of what is the best way to improve your patience, part of it is, one, quietening the voice of judgment in your head. That's a really important one. Can you tell that voice to shut up? Second, can you flip whatever you are working with? Can you turn it on its head in some way? So you're able to see it with fresh eyes. You're able to see it without, with more curiosity and without certainty. That point I want to reiterate again, so that then that allows for more space in the creative act or the creative experience. So a couple of things. I don't know about night owls and early birds. I think that they both have their advantages and their disadvantages. I just hope that whoever, night owls or early birds, you're getting enough sleep, because that's really important for you to be awake and aware. But I think that that time is quiet time. Both night owls or early birds, it's quiet time. People are asleep, your phone's not buzzing, your people outside are not talking. That quiet time is really important. How is it that you're able to create some sacredness of that quiet time? I have done some children's books before, in this kind of similar style. I like working with stencils, particularly in image. This point about earning with art and design online, there's many, many ways, of course. For me, my point is that the sooner you start thinking about your practice as your own creative practice, you'll figure out ways to earn money around it. So, one would think that, oh, these are just these kind of books that are made out of, recycled paper. Where does one earn money from something like this? But part of it is developing a process that I'm able to share. So I'm able to teach about this process because I have taken the time to think about this as my own practice. So that would be my suggestion for you. Okay, so we are. I just want to make sure that we're okay with in terms of time for Ankita, Jayalakshmi, and for everybody on the Vogue team. And
Hi Arzu, I think 5 more minutes is fine, I feel.
Great.
Yeah?
So if there are other questions or thoughts. Somebody's asking for a feedback link. So I don't know if that's from me or whether that's something that the group does. So this point that you're making, Vinuta, about collecting and creating a journal about the significant experience of life, part of what I am trying to do with my students and the teachers and educators that I work with is not create such a separation between life and work. I think very much, and the reason that I asked you to think about what are the things that talk to you, what are the things that catch and hold your attention. These are very personal things. I might be interested in trees, you might be interested in crows, somebody else might be interested in ships, somebody else. But there's a certain like you, if you are using yourself as a compass, you orient to things in particular ways. And it is important, I think, particularly as creative people, that we're able to draw on our life and our life experiences, but we're also able to analyze them and look at them in terms of assumptions. So much of the way we think has been ingrained in us, and we don't even figure out gaps or cracks in our thinking. And this is where I come to the idea of exchange. When you exchange your ideas with someone else and they have a different position from you, that's when it gives you the opportunity to see your own assumptions and to see also, not just in a negative sense, but also positively. Where do your ideas come from? Why do you think the way you do? Very much you do that because of your life experiences. And so it's not such a separate process. It's very much of an integrated process. You are conditioned in all of the different ways that you have been conditioned by nature or by nurture. And that comes out in us as adults, as, right through our growing process. So how do we engage and bring our life and our work in more fluidity together? I think that turning to the natural world is something that I do a lot. And somebody's point about vegetables and fruits for creativity, but also the question that somebody else has asked about what kind of art form do I like the most? I think there are two things. One is there is the internal, of course, and there is the external. There's the external world around me, and I'm very intrigued by the natural world. But there's also the dynamics of community. And so a lot of times my own work is involved in community-based art practice. I don't know if many of you have, for anybody who's been in Bangalore and has been in the Bangalore metro, the artworks that you see at Cubbon Park or Peenya or Chickpet Metro Station are part of a project that I run called Art in Transit. And it's very much about looking at community practice and an area of work called public pedagogy. So those are the kinds of art that I'm interested in. I do think that education plays a huge role in the area of design. And I very much see myself as an educator. I think that the role of the educator today is not somebody who knows it all, but really somebody who's facilitating how does our thinking change. And given our times, one of the biggest questions that is in my accordion book that I'm working on right now is how do we not go back to the old normal? What are the ways that we have to think about and move in a way that, and where do we want to situate ourselves in what becomes a new normal? How do we have a new normal that's more sustainable, that is less racially and culturally divisive, those kinds of things. So I think the education plays a huge role in how we as facilitators start to engage in conversations like this. And how do we make them personal in the sense that using your own creative practice, this is not just an idea that is out there. It is an idea that is here, it's inside of you. It connects with some of the things that people have asked about, the internal and the external, the idea of life experiences. All of these things get woven together. So the role of the educator and the role of education is this process of weaving this thread that goes together through all of these things. And part of keeping these books is the ability to track and map. Again, that I think has huge value. So this last question, and I think that we can close this is, what is the difference today and earlier art? Where do we stand in the new art world today? And I think that this is a really difficult question. It's not an easy question. Today, both in the way that artists and creative people and social services, it's like it's not so distinct. Who the artist is, who the designer is not so clearly distinct. Everybody right now is working a whole range of various development goals, whether it is supporting people and marginalized communities, whether it is changing the world in some way, whether it is creating products that are more sustainable. It's much more of an interconnected world. And there, in that interconnected world, there is a huge role that art and creative practice can play in any sector. And that's the point that I would like to make. It's not so much that the art world is one. Right now, it's much more interconnected and interrelated. How we as art designers start working across and in all sectors. I think that's a huge, huge space.
So, can we conclude, Arju?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much, Arju, for a wonderful webinar. Thanks for accepting our request in your busy schedule and making it happen. Thanks for making everyone to realize the art of making and understand the importance of making your own accordion book. It was a very interesting session. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thank you for your good questions and your thoughts. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks Arzu, Vogue, participant, and my team to make this webinar so successful. Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Everyone.